Assalamu alaikum sir. Today I'm going to define political space based on monarchies and non-monarchies, also how these political spaces emerged and how it influenced geographical and cultural structures. In ancient times, when the populations and territory increased from the need of centralized structures to control people, manage resources, and maintain order, that is how the political spaces emerged. Also, due to local war and social stratification resulted from a lack of land or water, and invasions also made new areas that required effective governance. Political space is defined by the structured geographical area where a central authority, a monarchy or empire, maintains management or administrative control, official power like taxation, institutions, and laws. Then also military defense and enforcement like figurative authority, religion, ideology, and royalty. Also communication and building, roads, bureaucracy, these are also included in political spaces. And political formation. Thus, we can see how physical borders such as those of a state or empire and political system structures are integrated. Several monarchies were created using the concepts mentioned above, like including the Indian Maurya Empire, whose founder was Chandragupta Maurya. Cyrus the Great founded Persia, also known as the Achaemenid Empire. China's Han Dynasty was founded by Emperor Gaozu Liu Bang. To defend and preserve the authority, rulers used social ideology, philosophy, and religion. For example, Ashoka used Buddhism, Han emperors used Confucianism, and Athens developed democratic ideals. Political spaces enabled those leaders and republics an opportunity to regulate trade routes, collect taxes, and control the production of agriculture. In order to control the food supply, tax collection, and building projects, densely populated areas in ancient Egypt and Moro India needed centralized governance. Rival tribes, city-states, and geographical areas were often engaged in conflict over territory, important natural resources, or trading routes. The competitive environment in the societies had to construct better organized political and military structures. The Achaemenid Empire grew and established a multi-ethnic imperial region under satrap rule by conquering rival nations. Then, after conquering the Italian peninsula via partnerships and conflicts, the Roman Republic expanded around the Mediterranean. Therefore, as a solution for the complexity of managing a large area and government, the Han Dynasty established a Confucian bureaucracy. While being a democracy, Athens managed her imperial space through central power by tax collection, and military partnerships. How those mentioned monarchies and non-monarchies brought about changes in culture and constitutional systems and geographical boundaries are like how the Moro Empire unified most of the Indians under one rule. They adopted Buddhism and spread its teachings. Ashokan laws inscribed on rocks and pillars spread a unified cultural and ethical code throughout South Asia. The Achaemenid Empire connected three continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe, allowed various cultures to keep their own traditions and beliefs. The Han Dynasty made Confucianism the state ideology, shaping family values, education, bureaucracy, and civil duty, and expanded into Korea, Vietnam, and Central Asia by making ecological zones. Classical Athens was the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, theater, where Socrates and Plato influenced, art was born. Then controlled city-states in Greece through the Delian League. In ancient times, monarchies established and constructed political spaces via imperial conquest, diplomatic activities, collaborations, and unification of different people geographically under a single ruler. From 3000 BCE to 500 CE, the establishment of political spaces was about organizing and preserving control over large and diverse regions, not just about military established by military conquest. The foundation for future governance and global political relations and affairs was established by these ancient political spaces. Plenty of future structures of government were developed with the ancient legal codes and constitutions that were shaped. Common constitutions inspired by ancient regulations. These modifications weren't unique. Later civilizations such as modern democratic republics and federal governments were influenced by the ongoing interactions between cultural and political systems.
Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. I am Muhammad. Here is my introduction in this slide. Today, I will be discussing how ancient monarchies and non-monarchies use geography and administration to control their empires. We will look at how they took over new territories, created systems and to rule them, and shape political space, meaning the way the power, law, and culture were organized over the land. Okay, we will understanding the political space by exploring the ancient civilization and the monarchies and non-monarchies use geography to expand, govern, and shape that space. First of all, we are talking about the Mauryan Empire, which organized from Magadha in 325 before the Common Era and continued the Achaemenian tradition, was the first to unify the Indian subcontinent and become a superpower of region. The capital of Patliputra and the other important cities, the Taxila and Subhanagiri, helped control the empire. They built big roads like Uttrapath and they sent masses to move soldiers and trade. Emperor Ashoka used rock and pillar edict the sheer moral message called Dhamma. This helped unite people under the idea. So Mauryan Emperor used roads, cities and cities to message the rule and for large areas. Now I will talk about the Achaemenid Empire, which existed from around 550 to 330 before the Common Era. It was founded by Cyrus the Great and became one of the first empires to unite many different religions under one system. They divided the empire into provinces called satrapies. The each rules by governor. To control this huge area, King Darius built a royal road about 1600 miles long which helped with trade, communication, and moving armies. Babylon is good example of change. Before Persia, it was independent city-state. After the conquest in 539 before the Common Era, it became a Persian province. Its law, religions, and governance all changed to match Persian rule. This is how the space and power were reshaped by their empires. This slide shows how the Han dynasty from 206 before the Common Era and 220 Common Era organized the empire. They used the commandery country system to directly control areas. Cities like Danhang and connected to capital, road, militants, and taxes. Also, it helped unify the empire by spreading one legal and moral system across all religions. In short, the Mauryan and Achaemenian and Han empires turned geography into political control. They used road governance and use moral law to connect and manage large cities and areas. Instead of just ruling with force, they created a shared system of law, belief, and administration. This helped turn many different places into one united empire. Monarchies work from the top down, controlling both the center and fairway religions through the strong system and ideas. Now we will talk about non-monarchy. The Rome Republic grew up building colonies and towns with different level of citizenship. They use roads like Via Appia and connect all the parts of their land. They well conquered places like Carthage. They made part of the Rome system using law and buildings. The maps show how the Rome slowly extended across Italy and nearby instant. Rome didn't just take land; they made it Roman by adding roads, rules, and Roman cultures. Here we can see the image of the Punic War. The Punic War were fight between Rome and Carthage from 264 to 146 before the Common Era. Carthage was a rich and powerful city by the sea. After the last war, Rome destroyed Carthage, took its land, and made it Roman Empire. Later, Rome rebuilt it using Roman rules and the system. This helped Rome to control the western Mediterranean. Here, classical Athens is the city with democracy. It joins with other cities to Delina League to the fight of Persia. Later, Athens took control the league. They moved the money Athens to become more powerful. Instead of using force, Athens used language, religions, and its navy to control. In non-monarchies like Rome, Athens, and political space was more flexible. Monarchies was controlled everything from top, and non-monarchies used teamwork, laws, and culture. Rome let local areas manage themselves. Athens kept power by sharing language, festivals, ideas. Non-monarchies were not less powerful; they just ruled in more open and adaptable way. Thank you. It's from my side.
Hello everyone, I am Shajin Mahmood from CSE department. Today, me and my groupmate will give a short comparative study on the political and administrative hierarchies of ancient Persia and the Roman Republic. Both civilizations had strong systems of government, but they were very different in how they handled power, leadership, and public involvement. In the next few minutes, we will explain how each system worked and what made them different from each other. Let's start with the basic idea of how both systems were run. The Persian Empire had a centralized monarchy, which means all power was in the hand of one king, known as the King of Kings or Shahanshah. He claimed that his power came from Ahura Mazda, the main god in their religion. On the other hand, the Roman Republic followed a mixed system, where power was shared between elected leaders and the Senate. They used checks and balances to make sure no one person or group had too much power. or control. So, even though both had organized governments, their main ideas were different. Persian focused on religious authority, while Roman focused on laws and public participation. In Persia, the system started with the great king, who had full control over everything like taxes, farming, and trade. Below him was the imperial court, which included top judges and military officers who helped to run the empire. The empire was divided into big regions called satrapias, and each one was ruled by a satrap, usually a noble person or local leader trusted by the king. Under the satraps were sub-satraps, often Persians or Medians, who took care of smaller local areas. To prevent corruption, the king used a secret group called the eyes and ears of the king. Those royal inspectors traveled across the empire to check whether the satraps were loyal and doing their duties properly. This entire system allowed the king to control a huge empire efficiently, while also allowing local customs and leadership to continue peacefully. Now, let's take a look at the Roman system. At the top were the consuls, two elected leaders who shared executive and military power. Their term lasted only 1 year, and having two of them helped prevent any misuse of power. Next came the Senate, made up of aristocrats. They advised the consul and handled important matters like laws and foreign policies. Below them were the magistrates, who look after court issues, finances, and public service like roads and buildings. A special part of Rome's system was the assemblies. These were groups where citizens could vote, pass laws, and choose their leaders. Lastly, there were tribunes who spoke for the common people, called plebeians. They had the power to vote decisions made by the Senate or consul to protect the people's right. So overall, Rome's political system was built to include the people and make sure no one had too much power. That's all from me. Thank you, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. I'm Akem Upsinfot from section 20, and I'll mainly focus on the analysis part. So, the political and administrative hierarchies of the Persian Empire and the Roman Republic differed fundamentally in their structure, justification, and purpose. The Persian monarchy was a highly centralized system that emphasized the divine legitimacy of the king's authority, while the Roman Republic was built on a system of shared authority, checks and balances, and citizen participation. In the Persian Empire, the hierarchy was designed to maintain centralized control under the king, whose authority was legitimized by divine right. This allowed the king to rule over a vast empire with relative ease, but it also made the system vulnerable to the risk of autocracy. In contrast, the Roman Republic's mixed constitution prevented the concentration of power by distributing authority among elected consuls, the Senate, magistrates, and the assemblies. The system enabled more participation and accountability, ensuring that power could not be monopolized by a single individual or group. While the Persian monarchy's authority was justified by divine right, reinforcing absolute obedience to the ruler, the Roman Republic's authority was rooted in legalism and civic duty. In Persia, the king was seen as the earthly representative of Ahura Mazda, and his rule was considered both a moral and religious duty. Unlike Persia, in Rome, The rule of law, as exemplified by the 12 tables, balanced the power of the consuls and the Senate with public participation and legal checks. The purpose of Persian monarchy's hierarchy was to maintain order, ensure loyalty, and facilitate the emperor's smooth functioning while reinforcing the king's divine status. It was designed to prevent rebellion and corruption, ensuring that diverse populations remained loyal to the king. On the other hand, the Roman Republic system aimed to ensure public participation and prevent the abuse of power, with checks and balances central to maintaining stability and preventing the concentration of power in the hand of a single individual or class. Now, divine right or public right, which emperor got it right? So both the Persian monarchy and the Roman Republic established complex political and administrative hierarchies. Yet, their approaches to governance diverged in key ways. The Persian system was centered on concentrated power, divine legitimacy, and loyalty to the sovereign, with the king holding absolute control, supported by the institutions designed to ensure stability and prevent rebellion. By contrast, the Roman Republic was built on a foundation of shared authority, legal accountability, and citizen participation, aiming to prevent the centralization of power through checks and balances. As Farazmand explains, the Persian model not only contributed to the stability of its own empire, but it also influenced later administrative systems, including the Islamic, Ottoman, and even Roman governance structures. This enduring legacy highlights how Persia's centralized yet culturally tolerant system laid foundational principles for modern public administration across civilization. While both governance models were effected within their respective historical contexts, their differing structures reflect the distinct political ideologies and cultural values of Persia and Rome. Well, this is all from me. Thank you so much, sir, for hearing.
I am Fairuza from Microbiology Department. Today I will discuss Ancient China and Athens Monarchy Part, China. Today I will explore how monarchy in ancient China was justified, accepted, and deeply believed in through ideology, philosophy, rituals, and the spiritual imagination of the people. Now let's start with the first slide where we will discuss with political ideology, what it is and why it matters. Political ideology is a system of ideas, values, and beliefs about how society should function. It happens how people think about power, governance, rights, and social order. According to Andrew Haywood, it's a more or less coherent set of ideas that provides a basis for organized political action. In ancient China, political ideology played a powerful role in shaping monarchy. It gave meaning to leadership and explained why emperors had the right and even the duty to rule. For the second slide, we will see ethical and religious foundation of Chinese monarchy. The Chinese monarchy was supported by strong ethical and spiritual foundations. Philosophies like Confucianism emphasized hierarchy, moral leadership, and family order. Mencius added the idea that ruler must be virtuous to retain power. Legalism supported strict control and discipline. At the heart of it all was the mandate of heaven, a divine approval that justified the emperor's rule if disaster occurred. It was seen as heaven withdrawing that mandate. Emperors were also believed to descend from divine ancestors like Yolo Emperor, while aristocrats controlled land, imperial exams allowed some people to rise in society, adding a sense of fairness to the system. Society functioned like a cosmic family with the emperor as the father of the nation. And for the next slide, we will see contributing factors and public acceptance of monarchy. Monarchy in China was not just accepted by force, it was deeply woven into culture and history. Even in early civilizations like Longshan and Liangzhu, leaders were connected with rituals, jade artifacts, and religious authority. Ideas like Confucianism and legalism, combined with the mandate of heaven, made monarchy feel natural, moral, and sacred. Importantly, the imperial examination system made people believe that leadership was based on merit, not just birth. Even as dynasties changed, people didn't reject monarchy. They saw it as a part of heaven's will. And in the conclusion slide, we will see emotional and cultural belief in monarchy. Finally, Chinese monarchy touched the emotions and spiritual lives of the people. In a chaotic world, the emperor brought hope, peace, and order. Rituals like ancestor worship and Confucian techniques strengthened emotional loyalty. The value of filial piety made obeying the emperor feel like natural extension of family duty. Loyalty was rewarded, rebellion was punished, not just legally but morally. This created deep psychological belief that monarchy was right, necessary, and divine. In conclusion, monarchy in ancient China was not just a top-down system, it was supported by a powerful mix of political ideology, religious belief, social structure, and emotional tradition. People didn't just live under monarchy, they believed in it, and emotionally and spiritually. Thank you for listening. That's all for my side. My next presenter will present non-monarchy part. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Shejuti Kundu. Today I'll be talking about political ideologies in non-monarchical Athens and Aristotle's political cycle in ancient and modern contexts. Firstly, focusing on political ideologies and sources in non-monarchical Athens. In ancient Athens, political ideology was rooted in ethics and rationality, believing that if people were free, they could govern themselves peacefully. The concept of the police empowered many adult males to engage politically, but this inclusivity was stratified. Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded from the so-called people's rule, showing that freedom had limitations. Wealthy elites, particularly those who profited from the Laurian silver mines, held disproportionate influence in decision making. So while Athens promoted collective governance, actual control remained in elite hands. Public spaces were open, but real access was selective. Hence, Athenian democracy was both participatory and exclusionary at once. Moving forward to the next slide, uh, ideology formation in non-monarchical Athens. Athenian ideology did not arise from theory alone. It was a response to elite failure and growing inequality. Solon's reforms such as debt cancellation and freeing slaves opened up political space for the lower classes. Later, Cleisthenes reshaped tribes and created the Council of 500, breaking aristocratic monopolies and giving rise to civic identity over birthright. Public institutions like the assembly and ostracism helped legitimize citizen voice through again only for male citizens. While democracy promised fairness, it is still systematically excluded women, foreigners, and slaves. The ideology framed itself as just, yet it served elite preservation through controlled inclusion. Democracy became a tool of both empowerment and subtle hierarchy. Now let's move on to the next slide, focusing on Aristotle political cycle and mixed constitution. Aristotle believed that political systems are temporary and follow a cycle. Monarchy decays into tyranny, aristocracy into oligarchy, democracy into mob rule, and then the cycle restarts. These ideological shifts happen due to corruption, imbalance, and public dissatisfaction. To break the extremes, Aristotle proposed the mixed constitution, where it is a system combining elements of oligarchy and democracy to balance power. In theory, each class would check the other's excess, promoting moderation. However, even this mixed model could not prevent instability if ethical decay set in. Ancient China and Athens followed this cycle. ideal systems erode over time into rebellion and control. Thus, Aristotle's theory explains the fragility of even well-structured systems. Now, let's take the theory into practice, moving to applying Aristotle's cycle in USA and Russia. Today's world reflects Aristotle's cycle. In the USA, we see democratic strain, polarization, mistrust, and 2021 Capitol riots reveal cracks in institutional trust. Russia, on the other hand, represents an electoral authoritarianism, democracy in appearance, but centralized in practice under Putin. Both nations illustrates shifts from participatory rules toward instability or authoritarian control, echoing Aristotle's prediction. Mixed systems are not immune without civic ethics and accountability. They can collapse or be hijacked. In both cases, structural design alone is not enough to sustain stability. These examples show how the cycle persists, shaped by ethical failure and concentrated power. Political virtue remains essential to avoid collapse. Finally, let's reflect on future. Aristotle's cycles persist because systems are always vulnerable to imbalance, mistrust, and erosion of civic responsibility. Democracy offers freedom and rights, but is often chaotic and short-sighted. Authoritarianism promises order but sacrifices liberty and participation. The mixed constitution seeks a balance, but it too fails if civic virtue decays. In truth, no model escapes the cycle without an ethical and engaged citizenry. The deeper issue is not structural, but commitment to justice and accountability. To break the cycle, society must uphold its ideological promises, not just enact legal reforms. So in conclusion, Aristotle's cycles remains alive from ancient Athens to modern democracies. The survival of political systems depends not only on law and reforms, but on civic ethics and public responsibility. To truly escape the cycle, we must not build better system. We must become better citizens. Thank you, everyone. Now I am passing the floor to my next presenter.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, I am Kamrul Huda. Today I will be discussing how gender as a social construct played a significant role in shaping ancient societies. We will explore how gender roles were defined, maintained, and enforced, though religion, law, and culture ultimately influencing power, identity, and the social order. Defining gender and gender politics. In ancient civilization, gender was not a neutral category, it was a central organizing principle of society. Unlike sex, which is biological, gender is a social and cultural identity that outlines what roles individuals are expected to play based on their pre-received sex. These roles were not based on nature but were deliberately structured and reinforced by social rules, beliefs, and institutions. Politics refer to how power is distributed and exercised, though gender norms essentially who gets to hold authority, make decisions, and have a public voice. Society's gender politics privileged men in virtually every aspect of life. Men were leaders, priests, landowners, landmakers, while women were expected to serve the household, bear children, and remain obedient. These roles were deeply embedded in family, religion, education, and governance. Not just social customs, they were tools for controlling behavior and preserving social hierarchies. Influences shaping gender roles. Gender identity in the ancient world was not self-chosen or flexible. It was shaped and enforced by powerful social institutions. Religion was one of the strongest forces behind this. In ancient Hindu society, texts like the stated that a woman must always be under the authority of a man, her father, her husband, or her son. Confucian teaching in ancient China promoted a similar model of obedience and silence. Women were prized for being modest, chaste, and loyal, and punished if they violate these expectations. This picture rituals, dress code, and family customs define proper feminine behavior. In Sparta, women had more freedom, but only because it served the state's military goals, whether though religious commandments, legal codes, or social custom. Ancient societies construct strict boundaries around femininity, reinforces male dominance, and limiting female agency. Gender as a power structure. In understanding ancient civilization, it's important to recognize that gender was not just a set of roles, it was a structured systems of power. Historical John Scott, in her landmark essay, argued that gender is a fundamental way of expressing relationship of power in any society. In ancient times, gender helped determine who had the right to speak, rule on, and decide. Men, almost without exception, occupied position of influence, while women were expected to serve.
Hello everyone, my name is Mohammad Motarusun Ayan. Today I'm gonna discuss about the lives of women in monarchies and the lives of women in non-monarchies and compare this. So let's move to the slides. First, we are gonna talk about the women in monarchies. So my subject is Achaemenid Persian empires. Let's begin. In the first point, the royal women, particularly those in the inner court, such as queens and princesses, held indirectly political influences. A notable example is Queen Atossa, the daughter of Cyrus the Great, who played a powerful role in royal decision making and succession. And the second point, these elite women were often tasked with managing large states and served as diplomatic intermediaries influencing political affairs behind the scene. Now let's move to the third point. Additionally, they actively participate in religious rituals which reinforce their significance within both the spiritual and political spheres of the empires. Uh, however, hmm, however, it's important to note that their power was contagious to their relationship to male rulers. This reflects the patriarchal nature of the Achaemenid society, as we can discuss in the fourth point. Now let's move on to the fifth one. While elite women enjoyed privileges such as land ownership and economic control, common women had far fewer rights and social mobilities. And lastly, the vastness of the Persian Empire meant the local customers shaped women's status differently across various strapes. These created a diverse yet still hierarchical experience for women through the empires. That's for monarchy. Now let's move on to the non-monarchies. Uh, Here, the non-monarchies. My topic for non-monarchy is at the ancient Athens. So let's start. Now, let's move to the first one. Despite the democratic reputation, the Athens women were completely excluded from political life. They could not vote, hold public office, or participate in the assemblies. Quite a harsh life, I will say. Instead, women were confined to a domestic sphere with their movement and action heavily restricted. They lacked legal autonomy and were always under the guardianship of male relatives, either a father, husband, or a son. Uh, then move to the third point. Women could not own property in their own name, nor could they conduct business or engage in commerce independently. Uh, then their only vision role in public life came through religious festivals such as Thesmophoria, which were centered on fertility and the responsible of women as wives and mothers. Then let's to the fifth point. Social and legal lives of Athenians women were paralyzed as those of slaves. Neither group held citizenship, and both were denied fundamental rights. Now let's to the last point. The exclusion reveals a deep contradiction at the heart. contradiction at the heart of the Athenian democracy, which, while the city championed justice and virtue, these ideals did not extend to the half of its population, and I am talking about the women's. Now let's to the next slide. Now we are gonna comparatively analyze the two the monarchist women and the non-monarchist women's lives. Now let's begin. In Persia, we can see that particularly among the elites, women had a degree of political influences, albeit indirectly through their familial ties to male rulers. Royal women could manage states, participate in court politics, and act as diplomats. So they have their rights well established. In contrast, the Athenian women were completely marginalized in the public and political sphere. Despite Athenians' democratic structure, women were denied all formal rights and lived under strict male authorities. The Persian monarchy with its hierarchical created space for elite women to hold limited yet tangible tangible power. Meanwhile, the Athenian democracy ironically was excluded and patriarchal, offering women virtually no public agency. So despite these differences, both social reinforced patriarchal norm. In Persia, these norms were embedded in imperial and family structures. In Athens, they were codified into law and social customs. So then ultimately the comparison highlights how political systems, whether monarchy or democratic, did not guarantee equality for women. Their agency was always shaped and often restricted by the dominant male-centric worldwide view of the time. So that's my comparative analysis of the monarchy and non-monarchy, and that's it for my part. Thank you, sir, for listening to my presentation.